Hi, welcome. Uh, we're going to be talking to you today about the Kubernetes Bug Bounty Program, what researchers and users need to know. But first off, who are we? My name's Taahir. I work on the GK security team at Google. The reason why I'm kind of close to this subject is that in general, the GK security team kind of consumes the output of this process. So we handle our security incidents based off Kubernetes open source security incidents. And to introduce himself, let's go over to Reed.
Hi, everybody. My name is Reed Loden. I deal with open source security at HackerOne. And to kick it off now, let's go back to Taahir.
So in this presentation, we've got a couple objectives for you. We've helpfully framed them in terms of questions here. We would like you to understand what is hacking, who are hackers, what is a bug bounty program, how does the Kubernetes security process work, what happens when a security vulnerability is reported in Kubernetes, and what can you as a user or administrator or contributor to Kubernetes do to help out Kubernetes security. Then to take us through the definition of hacker, I'm going to hand it over to Reed.
So first of all, since we're going to talk about hackers, let's actually define the term hacker. There's a lot of misconceptions about what hackers are and are not. If we start a search to see what the public thinks about hackers, it's not great. You see the instant search results here. These are what people are actually searching for. And in fact, if you do an image search, it seems all hackers wear hoodies and like they have this glowing green code. It's just matrix behind them. They're bent over their laptop typing. It's all pretty dramatic, and we definitely know that this is just not the case. So what is a hacker? Often the word has negative connotations, but at HackerOne we believe in hacking for good. There are many other names for hackers. Think of security researcher, perhaps finder. But simply, we believe that a hacker can be defined as someone who enjoys the intellectual challenge of creatively overcoming limitations. So how exactly do you work with hackers? Well, there's basically kind of three different ways. Let's start with the simplest form. It's called vulnerability coordination. It's a much more reactive approach by publishing a process that informs people outside your organization what to do when they discover a potential security issue. It is basically saying like, hey, if you find something, let us know. The U.S. Department of Defense calls this the see something, say something model of the digital world. You could see this as starting the process of welcoming hackers, letting out the welcome mat for hackers. But more increasingly, I see vulnerability coordination getting required for compliance in certain initiatives. Front runners would be the automotive industry, healthcare industry, and even the government as well. A step up is hacker-powered pen tests. So the key point here is the diverse set of testers. Every time you run one of these pen tests, you get a completely different set of elite, experienced hackers, making sure that you're reaping the benefits of many eyes. Obviously, this is a much more proactive way of doing things since you're actually taking charge and doing something, but it could be required as part of a compliance or vendor assessment effort. You get your results almost instantly as they come in, as the reports come in. There's no need to wait for weeks for a final report. You can see things as it's happening, and you can go ahead and get started fixing things. And finally, on bug bounty programs, a bug bounty is an extension to both of the previous methods. You're taking it to the next level here by actively incentivizing the largest community of hackers in the world to perform basically continuous security research on your products and services. You're offering, large cash rewards for valid vulnerabilities. It's obviously the most proactive approach, and it's also one of the best ways for your own engineers to learn security. There's no better way for learning than getting practical examples of mistakes that you and your teammates have made. And if you're doing penetration tests, whether these be hacker-powered pen tests or standard kind of like consultancy firm-based tests, the bug bounty program can let you better tailor those pen tests. So say your bug bounty program is receiving a bunch of reports on a particular area, well then you could laser focus your pen tests onto that area to knock out an entire class of vulnerabilities from prevent those future reports. At the same time, if you're not getting a lot of reports in your program on an area, then maybe that's a case where like, hey, the hackers are not finding something here. Let's use our pen tests, funds to like actually make sure that there's not an issue in this separate set of code. But again, allows you to focus those pen tests. You're not duplicating things. You're getting value out of both of them. But more importantly, it's the cherry on top of your software system development lifecycle. So again, what we're going to be talking about today is a bug bounty program specifically for Kubernetes. And over to Taahir.
So let's get into the specifics of Kubernetes. So to really talk about anything related to Kubernetes security, we have to introduce you to the Product Security Committee. They're the one-stop shop for all your security-related issues in Kubernetes. It's a business hours on-call rotation by community members, although it's not really that the community is expecting these people to do it out of the goodness of their heart. In general, this is something they do as part of their day job, and it forms a pretty significant chunk of their day job. So in the on-call rotation, the person who's currently on call triages incoming security reports, both from the HackerOne Kubernetes bug bounty program and from directly to the security@kubernetes.io mailing list. Valid reports are handled as security incidents, and we'll go through the process that entails. So what was the original motivation for wanting a bug bounty program for Kubernetes? So it got kicked off a couple years ago at this point. And some of the original motivations were to get more security researcher attention in general on the Kubernetes code base, simplify the triage and response process for the people on the Kubernetes Product Security Committee, show that Kubernetes is enterprise ready. So one of the ways you really demonstrate that your product is battle tested and ready to go is by having a comprehensive security story around it. Widen the net of contributors to Kubernetes security, both in terms of finding external security researchers and incentivizing them to look at Kubernetes, but also incentivizing normal contributors who would not necessarily think of them as having security skills to think through the security aspects of the bugs and features that they're handling. And an additional motivation was to define a way to get security coverage on Kubernetes project infrastructure, like the Prow continuous integration, the chat, the websites, that kind of thing. Without a bug bounty program, it's not really the case that you get a lot of people taking a look at those. So now, suppose a vulnerability does get submitted. What happens now? In its raw form, so this is a pretty good report, but reports have varying quality when they come in. Fortunately for the people on the PSC, as Reed will take us through.
HackerOne triage workflow. So what happens basically when a report comes in, a hacker submits a report on hackerone.com/Kubernetes. That report goes in to an initial kind of triage queue. HackerOne has a set of security analysts. A set number of them actually have Kubernetes training, certified training. So they're familiar with Kubernetes. They have some infrastructure that they can spin up to kind of test the submitted vulnerability. They will do what they can to validate the issue, including going back and forth with the hacker to see if any more information is needed. And once they've been able to validate the issue, then they'll go ahead and assign what they think is a severity, a CWE, which is a kind of the vulnerability type that it is, and do a short write-up of what the issue is. Once that's been done, then they will mark it officially as triage, and they'll also go ahead and kick it over to the Kubernetes Product Security Committee to take next steps that Taahir will be talking about.
Okay, so once this report is triaged by HackerOne, by their triage agents, then the PSC on-call will take a look at it. They will probably do their own reproduction to try and understand how serious the issue is. And if it is determined to be an actual issue, what happens next is someone on the PSC will step up as a fix lead. So that's a single point of contact who's responsible for shepherding the fix for the issue through its creation, handling the communication plan about the issue, and just generally having the responsibility for making sure that the incident gets handled properly. So once the fix lead is chosen, the next step is for them to assemble a fix team. Kubernetes is a huge code base. It's vanishingly unlikely that the fix lead is an expert or even familiar with the part of the code base that's affected. So their first job is to assemble people who are experts in that part of the code, and bring them up to speed on the issue and get them in agreement on how to fix it. Then, for the next chunk of time, the fix team will work on developing the fix. So that might happen privately in a private GitHub repo, or it might happen semi-publicly, depending on the severity of the issue. So semi-publicly would be the commits go into Kubernetes mainline, but they're not, the commit descriptions don't say things like, oh my gosh, this is a giant security issue. They just say, fix this or that. So this part of the timeline can be variable from days in the case of an extremely serious vulnerability to weeks if it's just sort of like a medium severity or low severity vulnerability. In the meantime, the fix lead is working on developing the communications plan for the issue. So that will be like, how do we explain this issue to users and administrators of Kubernetes, and make it clear what action they need to take. After the communications plan is put together, the next step is to notify the distributors list. The distributors list is a group of vendors who offer certified Kubernetes distributions to customers outside of their own organizations. So that covers cloud providers like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, as well as vendors who provide a distribution of Kubernetes rather than a Kubernetes as a service. They need that advance notice to work through their own security response pipelines. So they need to be ready to take whatever patches Kubernetes provides and have a plan for deploying them. And they may need a plan for near-term remediation, depending on the seriousness of the issue. So then the next step is, once the fix is ready to go, it needs to be merged and released. This can either, for high security vulnerabilities, this would be a new release dedicated just to that security issue, or for medium or low, you will tend to catch the existing release train of an existing patch version. Once the fix is merged and released and there are new Kubernetes builds available, then the public notification goes out that says, this is the issue, this is what you need to do, come get this new release and do these things to fix the problem. That goes out as a wide blast to most of the Kubernetes announcement channels. So Slack, the Kubernetes announce mailing list, and so on. So that's kind of the end-to-end vulnerability response process. Now I'll hand it off to Reed to talk through some of the metrics of the program so far.
Sure. So the program launched in January of this year. It has already paid out almost $15,000 in bounties. The top bounty awarded to an individual hacker is $5,000 so far. There have been 80 plus valid reports that have been submitted from 24 unique hackers. So this is great. I mean, we're only halfway through the craziest year of our lives, and we're already seeing a lot of great reports that have come in. So over to Taahir for the next.
Yeah, so there have been lots of great vulnerabilities, well, great or not, interesting vulnerabilities coming in through the program. In fact, the rate of reports has ticked up since launching the bug bounty program. Some of that may be due to people who we had pre-announced the bug bounty program, and so it's possible that people were sitting on their vulnerabilities until the bug bounty program was open. But hopefully it's also reflective of wider coverage. Some highlights that you may have recognized recently from your own inbox would be these two CVEs that recently had security notifications go out. I won't go into the specifics of them, but if there's questions, we can address them after the talk. So now, all this is well and good, but what does it mean for you? Whether you're a user of Kubernetes, an administrator of a Kubernetes cluster, or an existing code contributor to Kubernetes. Anyone can contribute to Kubernetes security. You don't need to be a security wizard. You don't even need to think of yourself as having security skills. The general way it works is that security bugs often start out as normal bugs. Someone noticed that something was broken, and it was only after further reflection or further thought that the security aspect becomes clear. So as a contributor to Kubernetes, if you're reporting a bug, if you're fixing a bug, just think it through. If there's a possible security aspect, submit it to the HackerOne bug bounty program, and you may be able to get a cash reward for it. What does that look like? It's a very simple web form. They've got a nice kind of guided approach that will take you through identifying the affected component, identifying the class of vulnerability, and walk you through identifying the severity. Don't worry if you don't know specifically specific values or the correct value for some of these things. Both the HackerOne triage team and the PSE on-call will be more than happy to help you dial in the appropriate values for these. What's important is if you think there's an issue, make sure it gets reported. And then now to talk about the actual reward structure, I'll hand it back to Reed.
Yeah, so we've the Kubernetes Product Security Committee has kind of split things up into 3 different tiers of rewards. These are based on the severity per the CVSS, the Common Vulnerability Scoring Standard. These are general guidelines. And obviously, the reward discretion is up to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and can be adjusted as needed depending on the individual issues. So for Tier 1 issues, this is considered to be core Kubernetes. This includes anything that's generally available and beta features of core Kubernetes. So this is both the primary Kubernetes staging or any kind of Kubernetes own core dependencies. Klog would be an example. And any kind of core add-ons, kubeproxy is a great example here. If you have the ability to alter source code without owner approval or modify release artifacts, that is a Tier 1 issue. If you can actually DOS the artifacts themselves and prevent people from downloading them, that's an issue. And again, the metrics, the reward amounts here starts with $10,000 for critical. All these are the minimums. They do have the potential to go higher, but at least for the minimum here is $10,000 for a Tier 1 issue. Tier 2 includes any generally available and beta features of non-core components. So it's like CSI drivers, kube admin, etc. The criticals start here at 5,000, and then finally we have Tier 3. Tier 3 is anything that is the Kubernetes infrastructure, prowl, documentation, etc. Except for, again, if there's any kind of infrastructure compromise that leads to code or artifact modification, that's all under Tier 1. And then also any kind of alpha features of core Kubernetes are counted here as Tier 3. And Tier 3 for criticals is 2,500. And so next, let's have Taahir talk about how to just keep your stuff up to date.
So as a user or an administrator of Kubernetes clusters, and if you want to be up to date on security announcements, which is a pretty good idea, if you're already subscribed to a general notification channel like Kubernetes Announce, that is good enough. Although there does tend to be, those are a high traffic lists, so you may miss the security announcement, or you may have it filtered out or what have you. So if you want to subscribe to a list that's just for focused security announcements, the best place to go is Kubernetes Security Announce at googlegroups.com. That will have all the announcements for security issues handled by the PSC. And just in general, if you maybe want to do something more beyond just doing code contributions here, or you want to contribute in a different way, look out for SIG security. This is currently ongoing discussions in SIG-Auth that's where it's currently being discussed, but they're going to set up a new special interest group for security that will govern the non-confidential aspects of what the work that's done by the PSC, kind of give it a permanent home and clearly integrate it with the community. You can join in the discussion, help establish processes for the new SIG. If you feel like it, join in with the discussion at Kubernetes Security Discuss at googlegroups.com. And that's pretty much all we had for you. If Reed could join me, thank you very much. We hope you learned something, and we'll be around for questions after the session.
Yeah, thank you again for letting us kind of talk today about Kubernetes' new bug bounty program. We really hope that you take all this information and see if you can find some bugs yourself and submit them. Who knows, you could be getting yourself some pretty high rewards. Thanks. Hello, everybody. If you have questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A section of the web interface, and we'll be happy to answer for them.
Hi, so looks like we have one question about basically if a security researcher does not wish to go through HackerOne, can you use the old security email? Yes, you can email, I forget the precise email, but the old PSC security report email still works. As to whether or not you're eligible for the bounty, I am not sure.
Yeah, the bounties need to be paid out via HackerOne. So you would need to submit that via HackerOne in order to be eligible for a bounty. But I believe it's security at kubernetes.io, if I remember correctly, for the email address. But keep in mind that email isn't really secure, not end-to-end encrypted. So obviously submitting over HTTPS via the HackerOne platform is preferred. And then another question came in, and to hear, maybe you can take this one, but it's, are the runtimes also included in the scope of the Kubernetes bug bounty? Containerd, Creo?
Top of my head, I'm not sure. Let me check and see if it is on the in the tier definition.
Can technically considered separate projects outside of Kubernetes, and that while they're used in Kubernetes, they are actually separate projects. So I'm not sure that they're included.
Yes. So if you do have find a vulnerability in those projects, it would be good to report them, especially if there is some Kubernetes specific aspect. But at the very least, we could help route them to the right place. or the Kubernetes Product Security Committee code.
We have a question. Are there any good examples for beginning bug bounty program? I'm not sure the context here is it's saying that like good examples of in Kubernetes. Taahir actually went through a couple of different submissions, and you can actually go to HackerOne.com/Kubernetes, and if you click on Hacktivity, you can actually see some of the previously disclosed reports there. If you're interested in seeing like some of the previous reports that have been paid out. Are you referring to something else? Sorry, there's not enough context here to know if you're referring to like maybe you're referring to like getting involved in your own bug bounty programs. There's plenty of other HackerOne and other bug bounty programs that you're welcome to contribute to. Or if you want to get started with doing just bug bounties in general, there's things like HackerOne101.com, which is just a great tutorial on kind of how to get going with that. Cool.
Oh, it looks like we got a clarification. Starting a bug bounty program at a company that does not have one.
Yes. So there's actually I'm trying to remember the name of it, so forgive me. But there's basically a bug bounty field guide that HackerOne put out that you can look for that actually does a really good job of kind of giving you a start to finish process on how to get going. And again, like I don't want to be salesy, but like HackerOne is one option, and there's other companies as well, or you can try doing stuff yourself for that. But that particular document, if you search for HackerOne Bug Bounty Field Guide, it's just a freely available guide that you can use for getting started on building your own bug bounty program. Another question came in: are there more CNCF projects that are on HackerOne? Yes, I'm not sure if there still are. I know that the Hyperledger stuff was on HackerOne for a while. I'm not sure if it still is. And that there's definitely a lot of other Linux Foundation projects that are on HackerOne. CNCF, I'm not entirely sure. I know that Kubernetes is by far the biggest one, but I think Hyperledger was, and there may have been a couple others as well. I can take a look and see really fast. Not seeing anything off the top of my head, though. But again, we're always happy to help out. It's any open source project can use HackerOne for free via our HackerOne Community Edition. So we're always happy to help there. Any other questions that we could answer for the audience? And again, we really appreciate you listening in on us speak. It's always weird because this is a brave new world of this simul-live of like pre-recorded talks and then us taking. But I really appreciate you willing to spend time to basically sit at your computer for hours and listen to talks. So thank you again. And especially when all like the haircut places are closed. So I get bad hair day. Okay. If there are no other questions, I think we will wrap up a few minutes early. I believe we provided our contact information in the slide deck, and so you can get in touch with us there. I'll let each of us give our information, but you're always welcome to email me at read@hackerone.com. Or you can find me on Twitter at readloden, or on LinkedIn. Happy to answer questions. Taahir, you want to give your contact information?
Yeah, sure. So my email address is, well, I guess I'll spell that, TAAHM@google.com. And you can also find me on GitHub at AhmedTD. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day or evening.